All right, so I think we're going to get started here. All right. Before we begin, in the spirit of healing and education, we want to acknowledge the 48 contemporary tribes that, excuse me, with historic ties to the state of Denver. These tribes are our partners. We consult with them when we plan exhibits, collect, preserve, and interpret artifacts, do archaeological work, and create educational programs. We recognize these indigenous peoples as the original inhabitants of this land. Welcome again to everybody who's here. My name is Corey Ayanaji, and I'm the Ballantyne Gallery Manager at History Colorado Center and coordinator of the Voces and Arte programming. We are so delighted to have you with us this evening. Voces and Arte was created in partnership with the Latino Cultural Arts Center to coincide with History Colorado Center's newest Ballantyne Gallery exhibit, Hecho in Colorado. For more information about the exhibit, you can check out the exhibit website, which I'm going to put in the chat box for you. There. We are thrilled to bring together artists for this 7-part series of conversations to talk about the importance of Mexicano and Chicano art in the state of Colorado. But before we move on to introductions, I'd like to explain how this program is going to flow. The first thing I want to talk about is the chat box. This is where I will be sharing program resources, like the link I just shared to the exhibit. And this is where you will be able to communicate with me and the artists. If you have any tech questions, this is where you will put them. Some people might not see dialogue boxes the same way on tablets and phones and with computers as well. So we're going to do our best to accommodate all devices tonight. At the end of the program, we will have some time for questions and answers. So as the artists are talking, please feel free to write your questions in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer all of them at the end. And I also want to mention that we do have live Spanish interpretation for the duration of this program. If you would like to use this service, all you have to do is click the interpretation icon and select Spanish and then select mute original sound. If you would like to go back to hearing the program in English, all you have to do is select the icon again and click off. Don't select the English tab or you're not going to hear any sound. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the moderator of our program, Adriana Abarca. Adriana is the founder of the Latino Cultural Arts Center. She was born and raised in Northwest Denver and holds a BA degree in Latin American Studies from CU Boulder. After graduating, she worked in the arts in San Francisco for 5 years, including at the Mexican Museum, and traveled extensively throughout the United States and Mexico to build her knowledge of cultural representation. Her parents started the Abarca family collection as a way of supporting the work of artists' friends in Colorado and Mexico. Currently, she is the exhibiting curator for the Hecho in Colorado exhibit, now on view at History Colorado. Please welcome Adriana.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And on behalf of Team LCAC, we look forward to continued interaction with our community. And thanks especially to the folks from outside of Colorado who took the time to tune in tonight. So we're going to start with an introduction to a longtime friend, Tony Ortega. I was just now thinking about it, and Tony, I can't believe it, but I believe I've known you for about 40 years now.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And it blows me away. But I first met you, Tony, through my father, Luis Abarca. He met you through, I believe, Ramon Cali, the Denver painter.
No, I think I met your father through Carlos Martinez, actually.
Okay.
So Carlos Martinez and your father were really good friends. They used to meet on that restaurant down on 38th off of Sheridan. And then Carlos invited me to go there. And I think that's when I first met your dad, or soon after.
Was that when Carlos Martinez was the director of Chalk?
Yeah, that was when Carlos Martinez was the director of Chalk.
And then did you have your studio on 32nd near Zuni back then?
Well, back when I first met your dad, I had my studio on 32nd and Tejon. And then later on, I have my studio on 32nd and Zuni. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, great. Well, it's nice to see you tonight, and thank you for joining us. And we're going to start by showing some of the work that you have in the Hecho en Colorado exhibit.
Okay.
Then we'll go from there. So this is a piece that I really enjoy of yours. It's called Jóvenes, and I love what your usage of color. This, I would say, is very representational of your color palette, and also for the fact that oftentimes you don't define the faces. And what I say in the tour of Hecho en Colorado is that really could be anyone in our community that is represented here. It's very universal in that respect. Can you tell us a little bit more about this particular piece entitled Jóvenes?
Yeah, I think this is from several years ago. I was I used to participate in the Cherry Creek Arts Festival, and in fact, I've been in it about 9 different times or so. And I was accepted into their festival in the drawing category, the pastel category. So I did a series of small little pastels, and I believe this is one of that part of that series. So my earlier work is about the collective, the grouping, the gathering of people in the community, or workers, or students, athletes, kids in school, etc. So so the work is more about the collective, the grouping, than it is about the individual. And since pastel, when I first started working with pastel, since they're fat and they're not like thin like pencils, I sort of simplified things. You wouldn't see buttons on shirts, or you don't see individual strands of hair or shoestrings. So I simplified. And I borrowed a lot of ideas from folk art from Mexico by the simplification and the use of saturated color.
Beautiful. We're going to go on to the next image. So this is also in Hecho en Colorado, and this is a print. And what I love about this image and a lot of your work is that you depict the average or everyday, or just, you know, people from community, and oftentimes laborers or workers in the fields, the migrant workers. And you're one of the very few artists that give dignity to this community. And how, or what would you say inspired you or influenced you to represent that part of our community?
Well, first of all, initially, I grew up in Pecos, New Mexico. I spent my summers there with my maternal grandmother. That's where my family is from. And they had small farms. They had farms that were built on what we call barra strips. And they used acequias, or ditches, watered ditches that were community property, to irrigate. So my grandmother used to take me out to the field, and we used to water, we used to hoe, we used to pick, clean the weeds, we used to pick the vegetables and the fruits. So I got to work firsthand with my grandmother, who passed that tradition down to me. And then one of my professors that I was really close friends with up at the University of Colorado at CU Boulder, Rodolfo Garcia, when we became friends, I got to learn a lot about his background. And he came from a migrant family. He was born in Texas, and his family used to go up to Ohio and the Midwest and pick fruits. And he shared that experience with me. In fact, one of my first images was from some old photographs that he commissioned me to do. And then also my wife's father, Frank Montero, was a migrant worker. So as I got to know my wife and her family and her family's history, I learned more and more about migrant workers. And obviously, at the center of the Chicano movement is the United Farm Workers and Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. So I just think honoring or paying homage to people who pick our fruits, our vegetables, that bring this to our dinner tables, to our stores, are a very important part of our society, our culture, and obviously to our health and well-being. So sometimes I think these people are invisible to most Americans. So by making drawings, and this is a little etching, hand-colored etching, it brings honor to them. It acknowledges them.
So the fact that it's an etching, I would say probably, and I could be wrong, maybe about half of your work. I know you do murals, and of course you do the pastel paintings, but I've known you to do a lot of printmaking as well, and primarily etching, I believe. And I would guess maybe 50% of your work is done in the print format. Is that correct?
Yeah, as a student at Rocky Mountain School of Art, I took some etching, and there we worked with zinc plates and acid baths and asphaltum and hard ground, soft ground, etc. And then once I left the school situation, I didn't have a press or access to acid baths. So in the early 2000s, through a friend of mine, Mark Lunning here, he taught many of us artists, especially artists at the Art Students League, how to do these solar etchings. So you can use a drawing, a photograph, you can combine them just as long as you can make a film positive, and you can work on these plates that are light sensitive or photosensitive. So since about the year 2000, I've been making a lot of prints. And since I'm a professor at Regis University, there's times when I'm super busy teaching that I don't get a lot of time to dedicate to painting. So the printmaking and the etching process sort of wove itself back into my life and my creative work.
You mentioned that you're a professor at Regis. When did you become a professor, and was Regis your first gig?
Well, I've taught a little bit at CU Boulder. I've taught a little bit at UCD, but I started at Regis University in 2003. I started as an adjunct professor, and an opening came a full-time opening, and I applied and was able to get that job. So I've been at Regis University for 18 years now. It's a wonderful place. I have great students and wonderful colleagues. I do miss this semester because I've been teaching on Zoom. Obviously, the face-to-face contact that I normally would have with my students.
I know that you've taught printmaking at Art Gym and other locations. Have you actually taught printmaking at Regis?
Yeah, when I first started, I taught my students printmaking, and then I've also taught drawing, and now I'm more dedicated teaching painting and our design foundation.
And also, I know you've also taught at the Art Students League for many years. Are you still associated with them?
Yeah, I do. I don't teach for them as much as I used to, just because my time is consumed between either Regis and or working in my studio. But I teach a workshop. I taught a workshop, I think, back in February. It was an alternative mark making, but I've taught printmaking there and pastel drawing there also.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And how far back do you go with the Art Students League?
I started with the Art Students League in 1995. So what's that, 25 years now?
Okay. So we're going to go to the next image. And then this is an example of one of your murals. And if I'm correct, most of your murals are done with people in community. Could you tell us a little bit more about this project and when it was created?
Yeah, this is the most recent mural. It was commissioned by the Longmont Council on Public Art, I believe. And they commissioned me, and I have a show at the Longmont Museum now, and it's in conjunction with their 20th anniversary of Day of the Dead. So I did this community mural in the courtyard of the museum with about 36 other individuals. Not all at once. We rotated people in out over a 4-day period. And we worked on an MDO board, which is a type of plywood. Basically, I laid out the drawing and guided the students in mark making and mixing paints, but they helped me in the painting process. And I had kids as young as 5, 6 years old. And I had some teens, I had some young adults, as well as some seniors that helped me work on this painting. And now it's off of Main Street between 4th and 5th in one of the breezeways. And it's part of the permanent collection of the city of Longmont.
Excellent.
And this is in celebration of their 20th anniversary of Day of the Dead exhibits there at the Longmont Museum.
I know some of your murals are also at the, I guess you would call it the Peña branch of the Denver Health. Is that the Peña branch on South Federal?
Oh, yes.
Uh-huh. Center. And then I know you have a mural at the Escuela de Guadalupe here in North Denver. Where are some of your other murals?
I would say a majority of my murals are in schools, a lot of DPS schools on the west side, here on the north side. A lot of them are through, I've worked with a couple of nonprofits, Outreach, which is, unfortunately is no longer around, and Think 360. And they usually work with somebody at the school, and we get a group of kids and they help me paint. So I've also done some at some local clinics up in Boulder, Lafayette, Brighton, etc. And most of them are clinics that work with the Mexican Chicano community.
And I have to say that's something you commented on earlier, is that you tend to paint groups of people and community. I think that's really beautiful that you don't focus so much on just the individual, but on the collective. Have you painted murals outside of Colorado?
Yeah, I've painted murals in Kansas and Indianapolis, down in Texas. So those are some other places outside of Colorado.
Excellent. And I know you used to work with the Sam Coronado print shop in Austin.
Correct.
Have you also worked with other print shops outside of Colorado and Texas?
Yeah, I've worked with, I did 3 prints with the Serie project, and I worked with Sam. 2010, 2006, 10, and 14. And then I've also worked with Self-Help Graphics in East Los Angeles.
Right.
And then I've worked a little bit with Bud Shark up in, he was in Boulder when I worked with him, and I also worked with him a little bit when he's up in Lyons, Colorado. Those are a couple of the print shops I've worked with.
Excellent. We're going to go to the next image now. And then you can tell us a little bit more about a series of children's books that you did. This is an illustration from one of them.
Yeah, so up at the Longmont Museum, I have illustrations from 3 different books. The 3 books are on the adventures of Cholo, Vato, and Pano. This has been a collaborative project that I've worked with Dr. Rivera, Dr. George Rivera, professor at CU Boulder. He asked me to work with him back in 1992. And he developed a series of stories of a little boy, Pano, basically my son, Cipriano, and his 2 little dogs, Cholo and Vato. So Cholo's a little brown dog and Vato's a little yellow dog. And one of the books that's up there, it's called A Migrant Child's Dream. And it's about a little boy and 2 little dogs. And as they travel in and around the Midwest and picking a variety of crops. This is an illustration from Days of the Dead, Aztec Adventures of Cholo, Vato, and Pano. And you can see, we went for Day of the Dead a couple times with George, my wife and I. We went one year to Pátzcuaro, Michoacán, Zinzunzan, and a second time we went down to Oaxaca. So I was able to observe and be part and document. So I brought those images back with me and then incorporated them into my work. So this is one of the illustrations. So if you get an opportunity, go visit the Longmont Museum. The exhibit is up through January 9th, and you can see the illustration. You can also see some community altars there. And then one last story I have up there is the Cinco de Mayo, Patriotic Adventures of Cholo, Vato, and Pano. And George wrote all 3 of those stories. And they're written as a poem in couplets and rhyme in both Spanish and English.
So these were published quite a few years ago. Are they still available? Can people go on to Amazon, or how can people find these books?
You can order them through me and my website at tonyortega.net. You can also contact Dr. George Rivera. He has some copies. And there's some local bookstores that have some of the work too, but the best places would be through me and or George Rivera.
Excellent. We're going to go to the next slide. And then this is Speedy Hombres. Can you explain why you titled this piece Speedy Hombres?
Yeah, well, if you look in the background, there's a combination of collage, silk screening, dripping, a lot of alternative mark making. And if you look really closely, there's an image of Speedy Gonzalez. It's one of my favorite cartoon characters back when I was a little kid. And I always liked Speedy because he always was saying, arriba, arriba, andale, andale. And he was always helping his stereotypical drunken Mexican mice fight off the gringo gato, right? So it was always at the border, and it was always over some cheese or cheese factory. So I like playing with popular images or incorporating popular images that either poke fun or humor, but also make comment about our culture. And then obviously juxtapose that to some men sitting down, just gathering together. So I just thought it would be a funny little title call it Speedy Hombres. And then in the background too, you'll see a hybrid image of Our Lady of Guadalupe and the Statue of Liberty. It's kind of just right of center there.
Yes. And would you say that you've been inspired or influenced by graffiti art at all?
Maybe a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit.
Or how about abstraction or the abstract art movement?
Oh yeah, I always share with my students that my teacher's teacher was Hans Hofmann. And if you know anything about modernists who came out of Europe during World War II and then came to the United States and taught, Hans Hofmann was one of them. He came to the United States, obviously fleeing the Nazis, I believe in the late 30s, and he taught a variety of American artists. So my teacher, Jim Vallone at Rocky Mountain School of Art, was a student. So I like to see myself as a continuation of modern artists, of the history of art through my teacher and his teacher. And then I tell my students they're a continuation of that tradition also. So yeah, I think non-objective work or abstract work has influenced my work, specifically with my teacher, Jim Vallone.
Excellent. And then we're going to look at, we're going to move on to Carlos. I thought we had one more of yours, Tony. Sorry about that. We're going to talk to Carlos and then we'll come back to you in just a moment. And thank you very much. Let's move on to Carlos. Hi, Carlos. Good to see you tonight.
Hey, how you doing? Good
Wonderful.
to see you.
Thank you. We're going to start with your probably your most well-known image, as far as I know, the West Side Wedding. It's a silkscreen print that you created. I believe you might have done 2 similar versions of this print.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I've done two varied screen prints of the image.
When
Yeah,
were they created?
Well, the initial painting was in talking to Tony and I put together, along with Carlos Santisteban, a group called Los Three. And when we put together our exhibit, we talked about community. So I did this painting pretty much around that time when we were in the group Los Three in the late 80s, very early 90s. So I did a painting of it probably in 1989, 1990. And then 5 years later, I did my first screen print of that. And I did it because I was baptized in that church. Unlike Tony, who grew up in Santa Fe, I grew up right in the heart of Denver, in Denver's west side. And that's where I went to church as a child, and as I said, baptized there.
So for those who don't know, this is the original St. Cajetan's, the first Mexicano, Chicano church in Denver.
Yeah, it was built in 1925 by our community, for our community. So it's really the corazón, the heart of the community.
I recently learned from you that the reason why you don't depict people in attendance of this wedding is because of the displacement of the Agrarians. Could you tell me a little bit, or for the audience who isn't familiar with the history of our community in central Denver, can you tell them a little bit more about the displacement of our community?
Sure. Back in the probably late 60s, the city of Denver and a lot of the schools that were coming up at the time wanted to find a campus and create a campus. And so they, UCD, University College of Denver, Community College of Denver, and Metropolitan State University, where I teach, all joined together and decided to go join forces and create a campus. And the city chose pretty much north west of downtown. And the neighborhood they chose was the heart of the Chicano community, the Auraria community. So they pretty much displaced all the people that lived there and, bought out, the homes. We're going to raise everything, tear down St. Cajetan, St. Elizabeth, and many other old buildings that were on the campus. And it was decided that some of these structures should be saved. And so St. Cajetan was one of those. But the community was just, the heart of the Chicano community just was torn apart, and everybody went different directions. And the schools all promised scholarships to the residents that live there. And the school never gave the scholarships. And someone remembered, I can't remember who this was, but someone remembered this and had documentation and went to the schools and said, hey, where's our scholarships? And so now there is a displaced agrarian scholarship for if you have proof and evidence that your family lived in the neighborhood and displaced, and they get to go to school for free.
That might be coming to an end, though. I'm not certain, but it might be coming to.
Yeah, I think there's so many generations out.
Yeah. Were you by chance a beneficiary of that?
No. My parents lived up on 11th and Santa Fe, and my grandmother lived in the North Lincoln projects.
So very close. Very
close. Oh, just across the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I also appreciate the fact that you put in a lowrider into this image. I know that Chicano car culture plays a strong role in your artwork. Did you ever have a car that you fixed up, or?
Yeah, well, when my wife got married, we'll actually be married in another week or so here. We'll be married 40 years. And our car, which wasn't like that, but yeah, we did decorate it. And you know, you had mentioned earlier, and I just realized I didn't say like there's a wedding and nobody there celebrating, and that's because the schools did not give the scholarships when I created this piece. And I have done another version of this, a small painting with a bunch of people around celebrating after this the scholarships were given. Okay. But yeah, that's why no one's there celebrating, because of the scholarships. It was supposed to be a marriage between a community and the university or the schools, and there was no need to celebrate, you know.
We're going to go on to the next image. So this is the previous piece is in the Hecho in Colorado exhibit, as is this particular mixed media work. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the items in this represented? And I also know that the image in the foreground is the Mexican crooner Javier Solis. Can you tell us a little bit more about this particular piece of work?
Yeah, this came about with the word Hispanic, and I never really cared for that term, nor do I still. But I was just one day thinking about it, and the word panic is in there. So I just thought of like, it's his panic, or it's my panic that I'm bearing this word, right? And then myself as a teenager, having taken hallucinogens and drugs and such, this whole idea of things in disarray and trying to assemble and reassemble and take apart and change one's direction of work, and the idea of surrealism and all these little things came into play, along with spray can, as they used to spray on the streets of the West Side. And then I came into, while I was in college, art school, at the late 70s, when the punk movement came about. So I was doing collages, like punk style, with ransom note lettering and such. And so this is kind of a fusion of all that, of trying to create something new and different, trying to shake things up. But yet I'd go home and my mom would have a Javier Solis album playing, you know, or Vicente Fernandez. So this tradition was always there at home. But once I left outside of it, it was, you know, allowed me to kind of experiment and try, not only, you know, and I don't mean drugs, you know, experiment, but with my artwork, you know, to experiment.
So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the beginnings of your art career and where you studied.
Yeah, I studied at Metro State, where I teach. And early on, like, I remember in college, I was probably in my early 20s. I'm working on this piece in class, and I just questioned myself, like, what am I doing? Why is there this need to do this? And so I just kind of had these flashback, looking back, like when is the earliest time I created artwork? And, I go back to, high school, which I had really great art program that I went through at Abraham Lincoln High School here in Denver. And I look back, to my grade school, and then I just really just move way back to the earliest point I remember making anything. And I just remember making this little collage. It was a fragment of a card that my mom cut out. It was the Virgin Mary. There was some thread and just a little wording of a newspaper. And so I just remember putting that together. So when I got back to my home, I asked my mother, I go, when did I do this? How old was I when I made this little, collage? And she goes, well, mijo, let me think a minute. And she says, I remember, she goes, you were probably about 3 years old. And I remember gluing it together for you and helping you, because when I made tortillas, because I would have the flour and water to make a paste to make a glue. So you had to wait till I made tortillas. And so we could glue it together. And you were about 3 years old. So I started collaging at age 3, and didn't get serious till probably middle school, high school. And then college, I decided to go to Metro State, again, where I teach, which I've been there now 30 years teaching.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Wow.
How soon after going to school there did you begin teaching?
Let's see, I graduated from Metro State in 1980. And then it was 9 or 10 years later, I started 89 or 1990.
So I would say you were one of a handful of Chicano professors at Metro, or historically, I mean, that's been there as long as you have.
Yeah. The Chicano Studies department started, and I was in the art department, not Chicano Studies, but the Chicano Studies department started prior to, between I graduated and when I went back to teach, or when I started teaching. The Chicano Studies started, and they hired more Chicano professors then. But yeah, I was probably the first in the area in art.
Outside of Chicano Studies, yeah, that's
right.
Very many Chicano professors outside of Chicano Studies, so that's pretty amazing. We're gonna the next image here. You were talking about your use of text, and very much a feel for graphic design. Did you ever study graphic design?
I took a class, and that's around the time I started doing this in my class. It was some kind of graphic design class that we kind of had to take. And I recall my father, when I told him I wanted to be an artist and go to school for art, and it took about maybe 15 minutes of him trying to push me and sway me to go into graphic design. He says, oh, you like these Jimi Hendrix albums, Santana albums, why don't you get into and go design albums, And I don't want to work for anybody, Dad, I don't, So, after 15 minutes, he said, okay, go out and do what you need to do. But yeah, I really did get into graphic design because I did study these albums, I did look at albums. I looked at the graphic design, or professor, Eugene Eide, when he taught us, he would show images of really good graphic work, and so it just stuck with me. And there was something about, the punk movement. It's like when the Sex Pistols came out.
One of the albums.
Yeah, that was right there. It's just like, this is so quick to do, I was out on the street spraying my tag, and it would take like, 30 seconds, and I'd run, so I wouldn't get busted,
So now you were one of the original taggers, huh?
Yeah, that was like 1975, 1976. But yeah, and that's what this work too. This the same way. You could just kind of tear up a few magazines and assemble something, and you're done. It was just very quick, and I just equated it. It's very similar, the punk movement, and also minimal. Like punk music is, you could put a song together, 3 chords with 3 bandmates. So it's very minimal, and so I started thinking about that, not having much time, working full time, going to school full time, to make artwork. So it was just a very quick way to do it,
So was this your concept to put the Virgen of Guadalupe together with the Statue of Liberty, or were there other artists doing?
There were other artists. There were other artists that had done this, and actually, I saw it in a poster at Chalk when they were up on Platt Street here in Denver.
In the 80s.
Yeah, it was like 15th and Platt.
Uh-huh.
When they were there. There was a poster. Carmen was the director then, and there was this poster in the office, and I just happened to look up, and it was this fusion of Guadalupe and Liberty, and I just had to make my own version, and I think I made the first one in like 1988.
Mm-hmm. And now you're reminding me how I first met you. We did a line of postcards with Dia de los Muertos. God, probably 35 years ago, and I remember with Tony Ortega selling some of his T-shirts. So I go back with you for a long time too, Carlos.
Oh yeah.
I almost forgot how long it's been.
I think you were living in San Francisco at the time.
Uh-huh. And let's talk about this piece. It looks like it's a mural. Would you say this is a mural project?
Yeah, this was like when I mentioned Los Tres, this was a painting I did actually in Los Tres. And then underneath, what's there, it was a painting I did in Los Tres. And then I just had it in storage forever. And then one day I pulled it out, and I just started almost like I would tag on the streets. I just started tagging imagery on it. And it really stemmed from my daughter when she was younger. She's 36 years old right now. But when she was a teenager back in, I'm trying to think, I wrote this down because I don't remember, in 1998, when I painted this, my daughter was listening to some music in her bedroom. And it was one of the first times I heard sampling. And so I pounded on her door, opened it up, and it's like, that's Stevie Wonder. She goes, no, it's whoever, MC whoever, I go, no, that's Stevie Wonder. She goes, no, it's MC. So we have this kind of discord, and I say, no. So I go and pull this album I have of Stevie Wonder, play it. And I said, and she goes, oh, that is Stevie Wonder, but it's here. And I said, but I'm listening in this form. And I says, oh, they sampled. So that gave me the idea to sample imagery. So that afternoon, I just started like painting over old paintings and just started layering. And that was like, I don't know, mid 80s or so, late 80s, I don't know, somewhere in there. But yeah, this one is just full of just odd little imagery that some makes sense, some doesn't, I really believe.
That's a cool analogy of between music and artwork and sampling. And I also like how a lot of your pieces are very theatrical. And this is a perfect example with the curtains on either side of the image.
Yeah, the curtain stems from both, the theater. I was in a band. My grandfather, Ramon Lopez, we had a family band, and I played drums when I was like 16, Mexican music in Mexican weddings and such. And so, yeah, we'd be on stage performing. And then in New York, I went to New York in 1979, and I saw a play, and the set was by Picasso. And it just like, I got it. I want to create a set at some time. So this relates back to the sets of the theater, which I've done probably 25 to 30 sets now, which I love set design. So that relates to that. It's just kind of what you see on stage almost all at once, though. A painting being static and not having the fourth dimension of time, it allows itself to just layer,
That's wonderful. And so there's a kind of a connection between you doing backdrops for theater productions and sense of community, and this wonderful piece that you did on Morrison Road in the Westwood neighborhood. Can you tell us a little bit more? Was this a corrido, a commission?
Yeah, this was through the city of Denver. They had their public art process where, you submit and you get juried in, sometimes they get, 25, 30, 40 submissions or 300 submissions, and then the jury process goes through. And I was fortunate enough to receive the commission here. And this piece is actually, as I mentioned, my grandfather, a musician, he played guitar, and he taught all his 10 children. My mother, being the oldest, taught her as well. But the younger younger uncles, they're the ones who started a band with my grandfather, and then they went on to perform their own just like Chicano rock, Latin rock music, Santana, Malo, that kind of sound. And so that guitar is an homage to my family, really. It's a song of the neighborhood. I set the shovel in there to kind of, when you're working in labor, there's a point where you have to stop and celebrate and be with family or friends or that kind of thing. So the shovel on the far left is kind of dug into the concrete there.
And then there's the UFW eagle there, and so it kind of brings us full circle back to Tony Ortega and his work of the migrant community.
Right, that song of the people, that's what this is titled, a ballad for the community, really. And
what year was that created?
Oh God, I actually wrote this down because I don't remember. It was 2009. 2009.
Thank you.
I've been creating work forever, and my whole life, and I just I don't keep track of dates necessarily. So, but yeah, it was 2009.
So we're going to move on, and let's see. I don't know how many more minutes we have left here tonight. How many more minutes do we have here? 15 more minutes. So we're doing real well. We're going back to, again, we were talking about migrant work. We're going back to Tony Ortega piece, Las Cerezas del Velarde. Where's Velarde? Is that a community in New Mexico?
Yeah, Velarde, it's just a little north of Española, south of Taos. It's just as you're coming out of actually you're just about ready to come out of the canyon there. And Velarde is just a small pueblito, small little town, kind of similar to Pecos, but they have orchards. They have apple orchards and cherry trees. And it was always a family tradition when I would travel down to New Mexico to stop at the fruit stands. And if you go in July, you can get some wonderful cherries. So this was some of the local farmers picking the cherries right near the fruit stands there in Velarde. And this is a pastel. Go ahead.
Yeah, your roots are in New Mexico, and you spent your summers there. But were you mostly raised in Denver? I can't recall where you spent most of your childhood.
Yeah, I grew up in the north side.
Okay.
I used to live like 2 blocks from La Raza Park on Osage.
Yeah.
Back when it was called Columbus Park, and they had a swimming pool there.
What?
So I was just 2 blocks away. I went to Brian Webster. Our Lady of Guadalupe Church was our family church. That's where I got my first Holy Communion. So I have roots in North Denver, the north side.
Did you go to North?
No, I didn't go to North, but we moved when I was like 12 years old to East Denver. And I ended up going to Gove Junior High and then East High School. And then after I finished art school, I moved back to the north side and got an apartment and a studio on 32nd and Tejon, and eventually a studio on 32nd and Zuni. So, and now my wife and I have a home here on the north side.
You've been living on the north side with Sylvia for years and years, for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, we've been in our house about 30 years now. Yeah.
So I want to bring this in. And how is it that you guys are more or less that what I refer to as the younger generation? You both self-identify as Chicano. You both have, roots in northern New Mexico, southern Colorado, and now with the migration of our people up to Denver. And so, can you I'll start with Tony. Can you tell me how you first made Carlos's acquaintance and at what point you began working together?
Yeah, I think I remember briefly meeting Carlos through CHOC, the Chicano Humanities and Arts Council. I think I either first met him or first saw his work when we were up at the Lincoln Center up in Fort Collins. There was a show that was put together by Chaco in coordination. And then I think I started seeing his work, and then I think I met Carlos Santisteban about the same time, and we just started talking, and eventually decided, well, let's do a show together, and we called ourselves Los Three. We toured our work here around Colorado at Foothills Arts Center. Before BMOCA was BMOCA, the Boulder Center for Visual Arts, the Emanuel Gallery in Auraria. Down in San Luis, we took the show to Santa Fe and Taos, and myself and the two Carloses, we would give workshops and talks. This was back in, my son was pretty little. This was back in the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, that's my recollection. Is yours similar, Carlos?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we had met through art exhibits, and we just saw a connection and felt a connection with our works and ourselves. And it was some exhibit, and we were just talking, and I would go to your studio, and we'd just discuss and talk about our experiences and other artists. And I remember talking about art collectives and the like Osco out of Los Angeles and Los Four out of Los Angeles. And we just said, maybe we should do something like that. And we then formed our group, which, yeah, we, you look back, it's like, God, we toured like maybe a dozen different towns and cities, and drove up north and down south through lowrider graveyards and I don't know what all, we just had a good time. And what I loved about it, Tony, is that we always made a commitment to go into schools and educate our children and share artwork with the youth, and do programs. That's one thing I just really loved about what we had done.
Yeah, I remember going to the school in San Luis when we had our show there, and I think it's called Centennial or something like that. And you and I went in, and I think you had some car cutouts, and I had some pastels, and we worked with the community there.
That's wonderful that you both got involved with educating our youth and keeping the arts alive. Carlos, can you tell us, this will be one last piece, I believe, that we talk about of yours, Por Vida. And I think it has your sense of humor in there. And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about this piece and how you tied it into the Santero tradition of primarily northern New Mexico.
Yeah, this piece is actually there was a santo on painted on it originally, and I paint over works, but I did research when I was in high school, and I remember I did research on Chicano culture, Mexican community, and I remember going to the card catalog, which I don't know if they even exist anymore, but I remember going to the card catalog and looking up the word Chicano, and it didn't exist in my high school in the card catalog back in the 70s. And then my mom told me, my parents that were from, Southern Colorado, northern New Mexico. So I looked that up in the card catalog and art, and I found this book on northern New Mexico art and culture. And as I go ahead and check out the book and start reading about the art in that region, and I turned this page, and there was this saint maker. His name is Pedro Antonio Fresquis. And I'm like, this is like trippy. Why does he have this name, like mine, right? So I go show the book to my mom, and I actually just open it up and put it in her face, like, who's this, And my mom was like, I don't know who that is, It was like, and he created artwork in the mid 1700s, maybe late 1700s into early 1800s, and he's the first identified New Mexican santero. So I wanted to, pay homage to him. So I started kind of painting these retablos very traditionally, and there was just something that just didn't feel right. So I don't know if I even exhibited them, tell you the truth. And then one day I just sanded it off, and my wife is like, that's almost like blasphemy, And I'm like, well, it's just paint on a panel, And so I put one of my heroes on there, which growing up as a child was Batman. And then I just started screen printing the homies and this eyeball from car culture, custom car culture, and atomic symbols, and there's the lowrider car again. And I just kind of made it a more contemporary version of the retablo. And again, I had to make a note when I did this. And I painted I repainted it back in 2000, but I probably painted the retablo maybe 5 years prior, and it was just stuck in a corner.
You depict Batman as an angel.
Well, he is to me. He's pretty sacred, Adriana.
So, I thought we had another page that was, I guess those were our ending pages. What's next? I don't have a clock in front of me, but I think we have a few more minutes to ask Tony what's in the works. I believe you have an exhibit right now at the Botanic Gardens. You can tell us a little bit more about that. And then we'll ask Carlos after what he's up to. So, Tony?
Yeah, I have a show that opens this weekend at the Botanic Gardens. They have a new building. It's called the Freyer Newman Center, where they built 3 new galleries, an auditorium, classrooms, etc. And it's just north of the main structure. They're off of 10th and York. And the title of my exhibit is called Raíces y Ramas, Roots and Branches. So it's a variety of larger pieces of mine. I have some pastels, some monotypes, and some acrylic and collage. And that show runs from this weekend through February 28th. And you do have to get tickets ahead of time because of COVID. You have to, they have sort of time slots where people can go see the exhibit. And it's in collaboration with the William Havu Gallery. And this new building just opened, or it was supposed to open, I think back in April. I don't think it opened until this summer because of COVID. So that exhibit will be up starting this weekend.
Is this a retrospective, or is it just some of your more recent works?
No, it's not a retrospective. I would say it's like a mini survey of some older pieces and some more recent work. There's about 30 pieces in that exhibit.
Very nice. And Carlos, what are you working on lately?
Well, I have a show closing at the University of Pécs in Pécs, Hungary. I had a show at the CBA, a survey of my work a couple years back, looking at 40 years of art making. And in that exhibit, I worked with local artist Francisco Zamora, and we had created these works on canvas, and we hung them in like an inverted stepped pyramid. And it was in that exhibit at the CBA, the Center for Visual Arts here in Denver. And these people from University of Pécs in Hungary happened to come into Denver at the time and saw the piece and invited both of us to exhibit our work there. So that's up and just closing now real soon here, if it hasn't closed already.
Are you the first Chicano to ever exhibit in Hungary?
I don't know, but they should be hungry for Chicano art, you know. But and then the other thing I'm working on is I have a public art piece going up in the Paco Sanchez Park up around 13th and Irving here in Denver. And it's going to go up sometime in December in honoring the late, great, amazing individual, Paco Sanchez.
So can you disclose, is it a portrait of him? Is it something to do with radio and music?
Yeah, it has to do with radio. And he started the first Spanish language radio station in Denver. And I remember my grandmother listening to the radio. They used to play the rosary over the air. And my grandmother would kneel in front of her home altar, and the radio would be playing, and you know, with the rosary, you know, Santa Maria Madre de Dios. And she'd do that with the rosary, and we couldn't make noise because she'd be listening to the radio, saying the rosary every day at a certain time. And so, and my parents, as they, you know, we drove around as kids, we always had radio station KFSC on. So, you know, he started the first radio station, Spanish language radio station in Denver. And so the sculpture is an homage to his spinning all the platters. So I used a bunch of albums just kind of creating this kind of a collage of albums all out of stainless steel, and they'll be painted one side is you know how albums have labels. One side of the label is in English, and it tells about his life, and then the other side of the albums are in Spanish and tells about his life and history as well.
That's very cool. So we want to go ahead and end this with some opening up to questions from our audience. Corey, do you want to go ahead and lead that?
Sure. Yeah, it didn't look. We didn't have many. We didn't have any questions, but we did get a lot of. We've gotten some comments from people just talking about their connection as well to the Chicano Studies program. We have a woman here, Irene, who actually chaired the Chicano Studies program for 14 years.
Must be Irene Blea, I would guess. A name from the past, a blast from the past. Great. Well, maybe if anyone wants to ask any questions at the last minute, you're welcome to put those in the chat. What are some more comments that you received?
We've gotten a lot of comments from people, some repeat people who've been to multiple talks here, and they're just saying how much they're going to miss these talks with the artists, and that they've really enjoyed the show. And there was somebody here as well that said, Tony and Carlos, both of your work has inspired them, and they've admired your work for many, many years. That's Kathy Wright said that. She's just really happy to have a conversation with you or hear that.
Kathy.
Yeah. Hi, Kathy.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have just a few more minutes. Again, I want to thank you guys very much for joining us today and for your contributions to our community. And I also want to say that what I really admire about both of you as artists is how you've been able to incorporate some business smarts into how you've approached getting your work out to a larger audience. I think maybe, Tony, that came from your business studies in undergrad, in your undergrad years up in Boulder. Would you maybe just give us a couple of words on the importance of having that business mindset and how you incorporate that into your career as an artist?
Getting that business degree sort of came by accident. I was up at CU Boulder. They had a big Chicano Studies program. They had many of us artists went down to Jalapa, Veracruz to study at the University of Veracruz. And so I ended up going down there one semester with a bunch of other Chicano students. And I came back with a bunch of credits in Spanish and in anthropology and Mexican history. And I wasn't sure what to do or what to major in. And then professor up in Boulder, Lillian Robinson, she was a Puerto Rican, and she taught up there, and she put together a program called Commercial Spanish, where you could mix some Spanish classes and history and business. So I ended up majoring in business. So it was sort of by chance or by accident. So I like bringing business or getting my work out there, having a sense of accounting, a sense of marketing, a sense of how to approach commercial galleries, etc. And I think that that's helped me along the way. Yeah.
That's great. So I'm just gonna make a quick announcement here that our next artist, Voces and Arte, is gonna be on Wednesday, December 9th at 6 p.m. with Ana Marina Sanchez, who was a jewelry designer and maker, and Norberto Beto Mojardin, who has the largest altar in the United States up on East Colfax through this Saturday. And he's also the head of, the founder of Fashion Week Colorado, and an incredible artist and clothing designer in his own right. And then I'll go back to Corey real quick to see if there are any more questions or comments that came into the chat box.
Just a lot of no questions, just people saying that they love the program, and that Irene said congratulations to both artists for a lifetime of work that empowers our community. Franklin Cruz says, thank you for the stories that you continue and the knowledge your art has passed along. And that's the comments that we've received so far.
Okay.
I'd love to share some resources before we log off. If anybody signed on late to the program, we do record these and we post them on our YouTube page. If you go into the chat box, I posted a bunch of different resources, and the YouTube page is on there. All of the past ones that we've done so far are up there for people to view if you hadn't seen them all yet. Also, I also posted it. We would really love your feedback on how the program has gone, if you liked it or not, or if you have any suggestions for our last Voces in Arte, which is, as Adriana mentions, December 9th. We would love for you to fill out that post-event survey. And the slide on our website does say that we did have weekly cafecitos every Friday at 9 a.m., but unfortunately with these new COVID restrictions that were just put in place, those are put on or temporarily postponed, but hopefully before the exhibit ends, we might be able to get 1 or 2 more in and get some people signed up for that. Hecho in Colorado runs until January 10th of 2021. And I just want to say once again, thank you all to everybody that joined, and hopefully we get to see you all again at the next Voces in Arte. And I of course, I want to say thank you to Adriana, Tony, and Carlos for such an engaging conversation. And I also want to give a shout out to Gloria, who is our volunteer tonight and has been doing the Spanish interpretation for the event.
Thank you to our audience for joining us tonight. And again, thanks, Tony and Carlos. Good to see you. Good to hang out with you for a while, and keep up the amazing work.
Thank you as well. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for the invite.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Have a good one. See you, Tony.
Take it easy, Carlos.